What if the person destroying your peace right now isn't them? What if it's you, the version of you that keeps going back, keeps explaining, keeps making yourself smaller just to fit into a space that was never actually built for you? Right now, somewhere, someone is staring at their phone, message open, cursor blinking, rewriting the same words for the fourth time because they need it to land perfectly. Not too needy, not too cold, just soft enough to be accepted. That person might be you. And if it is, what I'm about to tell you is going to be uncomfortable. Because the problem isn't the message. It isn't even the person you're writing to. The problem is what you're willing to negotiate away just to avoid the silence they'd leave behind. This isn't a video about making someone miss you. It isn't about silence as strategy or walking away as performance. This is about something far more radical. Choosing yourself before you disappear completely. Let's begin. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. It's the exhaustion of being the only person in a relationship who is actually in it. You know this feeling. You're the one starting every conversation. You're the one bridging every silence. You're the one explaining why the distance hurts. To the person creating the distance, you're the one showing up again and again to something that only requires one person to keep it alive. And that person is always you. Here's what makes this so difficult to see clearly. You're not holding on to the relationship as it currently exists. You're holding on to the memory of what it used to be. The early version. The one that made you feel chosen. The warmth, the attention, the moments that made everything feel possible. And you're using that memory, the ghost of a beginning, to justify ignoring everything the present keeps showing you. A memory cannot love you back. A beginning cannot protect your peace, and 5 good months cannot carry 2 years of feeling invisible. Seneca wrote a hymn, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And that is exactly what's happening. You're not just suffering from what they're doing now. You're suffering from the future you keep imagining. The apology that finally comes. The change that finally happens. The moment they wake up and say, "I understand now. I see what I've been doing. I see what I almost lost." But while your mind is living in that imagined future, your body is living in the real pattern, waiting, shrinking, hoping, losing pieces of yourself one explanation at a time. Here's the question that cuts through all of it. Stop asking what they could become. Start asking what their pattern has actually been. Not in the beginning, not on the good days, not when they felt you pulling away and suddenly became the person you needed. The pattern, consistent, repeated, unambiguous. Do they show up when it costs them something, or only when it's convenient? Do they take responsibility for your pain, or do they make your reaction the problem? Do they protect the connection, or do they let you carry all of it and call that love? These are not dramatic questions. They are necessary ones, because if you don't ask them honestly, you will keep mistaking your effort for their commitment. You will keep watering something alone and calling it a relationship. And here's the part that should stop you cold. If you are the only one afraid of losing it, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. One person performing love, one person watching. Maybe they cared once. Maybe there were real moments. Maybe somewhere inside them something genuine existed. But feelings without effort will not give you peace. Feelings without consistency will not give you safety. Feelings without action will keep you starving beside someone who gives you just enough to stay hungry. And hungry is not the same as loved. Here's what I want you to do right now, not tomorrow, right now. Ask yourself one honest question and don't let your attachment answer it for you. What am I still carrying that they stopped carrying a long time ago? Write it down if you have to. Say it out loud if you need to hear it. Because the first step toward freedom isn't leaving the person. It's leaving the illusion that you can hold the whole thing together by yourself. That's where your strength begins. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in the quiet, honest admission that you have been the only one here for a very long time. And you deserve someone who shows up. Not because they're afraid of losing you, but because being with you is something they actively, consistently choose. Next, what happens when you stay too long? And why your loyalty, the very thing you're most proud of, may be the thing quietly teaching them to take you for granted. Here's something nobody warns you about: loyalty. When it has no limits, it stops looking like a gift. It starts looking like a guarantee. And a guarantee is something people stop protecting. Because guarantees don't leave. Guarantees don't have standards. Guarantees are just there, waiting, available, reliable in the worst possible way. Think about how this actually happens. It's never dramatic in the beginning. Nobody wakes up and decides to take you for granted. It happens gradually, through 100 small moments where your kindness had no boundary, your patience had no limit, and your forgiveness required nothing in return. They replied late. You were still there. They pulled away. You closed the distance. They apologized without changing. You reopened the door. And each time, without realizing it, you were teaching them something. You were teaching them that there is no real consequence for neglecting you. Epictetus said, "Some things are in our control, and others are not. You cannot control whether they become grateful. You cannot control whether they finally recognize your value. You cannot force someone to see what they have while they still have it. But you can control something far more important. The access you continue to give them. And most people never touch that lever. They keep the access wide open, while telling themselves they have standards, while saying the words, 'I know my worth,' with their mouth, while their actions say something completely different. Here's the contradiction that's quietly destroying you. Your words say, 'This hurts me.' Your actions say, 'You can keep doing it and still keep me.' And that gap between what you say and what you do is where your dignity begins to suffer. Not because of what they're doing, because of what you keep allowing. Every time you go back after saying you're done, you teach them your boundaries are decorative. Every time you accept confusion after asking for clarity, you teach them that your standards are negotiable. Every time you forgive without requiring change, you teach them that your pain is manageable, that they can produce it and survive it without consequence. And here's what you're teaching yourself at the same time: that your own word cannot be trusted, that the promises you make to yourself are the first ones to break. That's the damage most people never talk about. Not what the other person did, but what you did to your own self-respect by staying long after you knew you should have left. And I want to be careful here, because this is not about blame. You stayed because you cared. You stayed because the good moments were real. You stayed because leaving felt like failure, and you weren't ready to call it that yet. That's human. That's understandable. But understanding why you stayed doesn't mean you should keep staying. And there's a difference, a critical difference, between being loyal and being available for repeated disappointment. There's a difference between having a good heart and handing that heart to someone who keeps treating it carelessly. Love has patience, yes, but patience without standards becomes self-erasure. Love forgives, yes, but forgiveness without change becomes permission. Love gives, yes, but giving without self-respect becomes emotional surrender. So here's what actually needs to happen, and I'm not going to dress it up. Reduce access, not as a threat, not as a strategy to make them chase you, not with a dramatic announcement designed to provoke a reaction. Just quietly stop making yourself as available to the behavior that keeps hurting you. Reply slower, share less. Stop chasing clarity from someone who manufactures confusion. Stop rewarding inconsistency with constant emotional presence. Let your actions finally agree with your self-respect. Because here's what nobody tells you about the moment you actually do this. The moment you stop being guaranteed, something shifts. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but something in the dynamic moves. Not because you became more valuable. You were always valuable because they can finally feel the weight of something they had been taking for free. Your presence should be warm, generous, deeply felt, but it should never become so certain that someone forgets it is a choice you are making. A gift you are giving, something that can be withdrawn when it stops being honored. You don't walk away to prove you're valuable. You walk away because you finally stop participating in the lie that your value requires their recognition. Next, the part that cuts deepest. The moment love stops being something that builds you and becomes the very mechanism by which you disappear. I want you to think about the version of yourself from before this relationship. How you spoke, what you needed, what you were willing to accept. The things you said you would never tolerate, said them with complete certainty. Because back then, your standards felt unbreakable. Now look at where you are. This is not a judgment. It's an invitation to see something clearly that attachment makes almost impossible to see. You didn't lose yourself all at once. Nobody does. It happened in increments so small that each one felt reasonable, mature even, like you were choosing understanding over ego, choosing the relationship over your pride. You stayed calm when something hurt you, because you didn't want to seem dramatic. You lowered your voice when you should have been honest, because honesty had started to feel dangerous. You accepted less effort and told yourself, at least they're still here. And somewhere in that slow accumulation of small surrenders, you stopped asking the most important question a person in a relationship can ask. Is this good for me? Instead, you started asking a different question entirely. What do I have to do so they don't leave? The moment that becomes your question, love has already changed into something else. It has changed into fear. Fear of the silence they'd leave. Fear of starting over. Fear of what their absence would say about your worth. Fear that without them, you might have to face the parts of yourself you've been too distracted to examine. And fear is an extraordinary motivator. It will make you do things love never would have asked of you. It will make you check your words before speaking, shrink your needs before expressing them, perform contentment you don't feel, pretend wounds have healed that are still bleeding. A line attributed to Buddha says, "You only lose what you cling to." But in this kind of relationship, What you lose first is never the person. You lose your voice, the honest one, the one that used to speak without calculating the consequences first. You lose your calm, that baseline of peace you used to carry before your emotional state became dependent on their mood, their attention, their availability. You lose your standards, not dramatically, but gradually, each compromise making the next one easier to justify. And eventually, you lose the simple ability to wake up and feel centered before checking whether someone has chosen you today. That is not love making you deeper. That is attachment making you smaller. Real love, the kind worth staying for, may ask you to be patient, but it should never ask you to be invisible. It may ask you to forgive, but it should never ask you to keep bleeding from the same wound on a schedule. It may pass through difficult seasons, but it should never turn your entire emotional life into a waiting room where you sit indefinitely hoping to be called. There is a difference between loving someone through their imperfection and abandoning yourself to survive their inconsistency. One has dignity. The other slowly, quietly destroys your inner authority, that part of you that knows what you deserve, that part that used to speak up, that part that is still in there, waiting for you to stop drowning it out with justifications. Here's the question that will tell you everything you need to know. Look at who you are becoming inside this relationship, not who you were at the beginning, not who you hope to become if things improve. Right now, today. Are you becoming calmer, clearer, more honest, more yourself? Or are you becoming anxious, careful, dependent, afraid to say what you need in case it costs you the connection? Do you feel genuinely loved? Or do you feel relief? Relief when they finally reply. Relief when the tension breaks. Relief when they show warmth after days of distance. Because relief is not the same as peace. A moment of warmth after days of uncertainty is not proof of love. Sometimes it's just the smallest dose your attachment needed to keep going. Just enough to reset the cycle. Just enough to make leaving feel premature one more time. The Stoics were clear about this. You are allowed to care deeply. You are allowed to miss someone. You are allowed to love with your whole heart. But you are not allowed to hand over command of your own life in the process. Because here's the rule that changes everything once you actually apply it. Before you ask, do they love me? Ask, what version of me is this relationship creating? If it's creating a version of you that begs quietly, waits endlessly, explains repeatedly, and accepts less just to avoid being left, then the problem is no longer only their behavior. The problem is what you are becoming in order to keep it. You do not prove love by abandoning yourself. You do not prove loyalty by tolerating emotional hunger. You do not prove your worth by remaining available to someone who consistently makes you feel replaceable. If staying with them requires you to keep leaving yourself, then walking away is not the loss. Staying is. Next, the most misunderstood part of this entire conversation. What walking away actually looks like. Not the dramatic version, not the revenge version, the real version. The one that requires more courage than anything else we've discussed. Most people wait until they hate someone before they give themselves permission to leave. They think they need rage, a final betrayal, an undeniable proof. A moment so clearly wrong that nobody, not even the part of them that still loves this person, can argue with it. So they wait for the thing that finally breaks them completely. And in that waiting, they break themselves instead. Here's what nobody tells you about walking away. You don't need hatred to leave. You don't need a perfect reason. You don't need their confession, their admission, their acknowledgement that what they did was wrong. You need one thing, and only one thing. The honest recognition that staying has become punishment to yourself. That's it. That's the whole permission slip. You don't need more than that. You never did. But here's why most people can't access it. Because the moment they get close to that recognition, something inside them immediately starts negotiating. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe things will improve. Maybe I'm not seeing their side clearly enough. Maybe if I just explain it differently this time. That negotiation is not wisdom. It's not maturity. It's not love. It's fear. Wearing the costume of reasonableness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." I want you to sit with that in this context. Because so many people, when they finally decide to leave badly. They leave with a speech, with a final message designed to wound, with a social media post carefully constructed to signal strength while secretly aimed at one person. They leave loudly, because somewhere inside them they still need the other person to feel the impact. And that need, that final grasping for their reaction, is still attachment, just dressed in different clothes. Real walking away is quieter than that. Significantly quieter. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't perform, it doesn't check to see if it landed. It's the moment, unremarkable from the outside, when something inside you simply stops. Stops defending what keeps hurting you. Stops explaining pain to someone who keeps producing it. Stops mistaking the urge to fix things for a reason to stay. That internal stopping, that is the actual decision. Everything else is just logistics. And I want to address something directly here, because it trips people up every single time. You can leave without hating them. You can walk away while still having feelings. You can close a door while genuinely wishing the person on the other side well. These things are not contradictions. They are the markers of someone who is leaving from clarity, not from chaos. Because there are two ways to leave, and they produce completely different outcomes. You can leave from chaos, from the peak of an argument, from the height of your pain, from the desperate need to make them feel what you feel right now in this moment. That kind of leaving rarely holds, because it was never really about the pattern. It was about the emotion of a single moment. When the emotion passes, the reasons to stay flood back in. Or you can leave from clarity, from the cold, quiet recognition of a pattern you have examined honestly and decided you will no longer participate in. That kind of leaving holds, because it wasn't an impulse, it was a conclusion. Here's the practical truth about what this actually looks like. You say what needs to be said, if it needs to be said at all. You say it once, you say it calmly, without cruelty, without the need to win the conversation, and then you let your actions carry the rest. No follow-up messages checking if they understood, no monitoring their reaction to see if it worked, no performance of strength designed to make them feel the weight of what they're losing. Just silence, clean, dignified, final. Because here's what that silence actually communicates. Not to them, but to yourself. Every hour you maintain it is proof that you meant what you said. Every day you don't reach back is evidence that your word can be trusted. Every moment you choose discomfort over returning to comfort is a brick in the foundation of the self-respect you've been slowly dismantling for months. That's what walking away actually builds, not a lesson for them, foundation for you. Anyone can leave with anger. Anyone can slam doors. Anyone can disappear dramatically to manufacture fear. But it takes something rarer, something that most people who've been through real pain know is far harder than it sounds. To leave without bitterness. To protect your peace without trying to destroy theirs. To walk away while still having feelings. And still choose not to abandon yourself again. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of self-discipline available to us with pain. And when you manage it, when you actually leave that pain, you will feel something unexpected. Triumph. Not the satisfaction you imagined. Something quieter than all of those. The particular calm that arrives when the argument you've been having with yourself for weeks, maybe months, finally ends. You don't need them to understand. You don't need them to agree. You don't need their blessing or their acknowledgement or their version of the story to match yours. You just need to stop standing where love keeps costing you your peace. That decision, made quietly, held firmly, not performed for anyone, is where everything begins to change. Not dramatically, not immediately, but permanently. Next, what actually happens when your absence becomes real, what it reveals, and why the most dangerous thing you can do in that moment is watch to see if it's working. When you stop filling the space, something changes. Not immediately, but inevitably. The person who assumed you would always answer begins to feel the silence they created. The comfort they treated as permanent suddenly feels fragile. The warmth they accessed without gratitude becomes noticeable only now, in its absence. This is what the title means. When you finally walk away, they feel what they lost. Not because you became more valuable after leaving, but because your value was hidden under their sense of guaranteed access. Some people don't notice water until the glass is empty. But here's where most people destroy their own healing before it even begins. They walk away, then immediately start watching to see if it worked. They stop texting but check if he watched their story. They go silent but monitor whether she posted something. They disappear, but only to a place where they can still see the door. That is not walking away. That is waiting in a more polished form. Lao Tzu said, "Care about what other people think, and you will always be their prisoner." This doesn't just apply while you're with them. It applies the moment after you leave. If your silence is built around their reaction, you are still communicating with them without words. If your healing is secretly designed to make them regret, they are still at the center of your life. You haven't left. You've just changed your position while facing the same direction. Here's the only rule that matters in this phase. Leave, then live. Not leave and perform. Not leave and monitor. Not leave and carefully curate your life into a highlight reel aimed at one specific person. Just live. Actually, genuinely, fully live. If your absence teaches them something, let it. If it doesn't, keep moving anyway. Your job is not to manage the lesson they receive from losing you. Your job is to stop losing yourself trying to make that lesson land. Because here's the truth that will set you free if you let it. The realization, if it comes, is not your reward. Your reward is the calm that returns when you stop forcing your worth into careless hands. They may feel what they lost. Let them feel it. But don't stand there watching the lesson land. You have a life to return to. and that life cannot begin while your heart is still facing backward. Next, the moment they come back, the message that arrives, the soft sentence after weeks of silence, and why that moment is the most dangerous test of everything you've built. It arrives when you least expect it. A message, maybe just 2 words, maybe a paragraph carefully written to sound vulnerable, maybe a call that goes to voicemail and leaves you staring at your phone for 20 minutes. And the part of you that waited so long to be chosen lights up. This is the most dangerous moment in the entire process. Not the leaving, not the silence, not the pain of missing them. This moment, right here, when they finally reach back. Because everything you've built, every day of discipline, every hour of choosing yourself, every brick of self-respect carefully laid, can collapse in 60 seconds if you're not prepared for what this actually is. A reaction is not a transformation. Let me say that again because your attachment will fight it. A reaction is not transformation. Some people don't return because they finally understood your heart. They return because they felt the loss of control. They miss your attention, your forgiveness, your emotional labor, your ability to make them feel significant without requiring them to become responsible. They miss the role you played, not necessarily the person you are. And one carefully worded message can make that feel like love if you're not paying attention. Seneca wrote, "Time discovers truth. Let that slow you down right now. One emotional night does not erase a repeated pattern. One apology does not rebuild trust that was broken across months. One moment of tenderness does not prove that someone has developed the character they lacked when you were still there. Time reveals whether their words are rooted in accountability or only in panic." So here's what to look for. Not what they say, what they do. Do they take responsibility, or do they make your distance the problem? Do they ask how to repair the damage, or do they pressure you to forget it? Do they respect your pace, or do they rush you back into the same closeness that once made you easy to neglect? Because your attachment will try to answer these questions too quickly. It will hear, "I miss you," and forget the nights you felt completely alone. It will hear, "I'm sorry," and forget how many times sorry was followed by the exact same behavior. It will hear emotion and mistake it for maturity. Don't let it. Here's the practical rule that will protect everything you've worked for. Do not give old access to unproven change. You can listen, you can hear them out, you can even feel moved by what they say. But do not surrender your peace at the first sign of their discomfort. A person who has genuinely changed will not treat your boundary like a betrayal. They will not punish you for protecting yourself. They will not demand the old version of you, the one who forgave instantly, answered immediately, and made their comfort more important than your clarity. Real change doesn't need to rush you. Real change can stand in front of your pain without immediately making itself the victim. Watch for that. Because what usually happens, and I want you to be honest with yourself about your own history here, is this. They return. They become attentive, warm, present in all the ways you needed them to be before, for a week, maybe 2. Then slowly, so slowly you almost don't notice, the old pattern resurfaces. The late replies return, the emotional distance returns. The dynamic that broke you in the first place returns. Because nothing inside them actually changed. Only the threat of losing you changed their behavior temporarily. And once they feel safe again, the effort disappears with the threat. So let consistency speak longer than panic. Let behavior speak louder than apology. Let time test what emotion is trying to sell you. A reaction can reopen a conversation, but only consistent change, measured in weeks and months, not hours and days, can reopen trust. You are not being cold. You're not being cruel. You're not punishing them for caring. You are simply doing the one thing you failed to do before, requiring proof before paying the price again. Next, the pain that comes after all of this. The grief that hits at 2 a.m. The memory that ambushes you on a Tuesday for no reason. And why that pain is not a sign you made the wrong choice, but the most important signal you need to understand. It hits at the strangest moments, not always at night. Sometimes in the middle of a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. A song, a street, the way light falls through a window at a specific hour, and suddenly the weight of it is back, full and immediate, like you never left at all. And the moment it arrives, your mind starts doing something dangerous. It starts editing. It brings back the good days first. Always the good days first. The warmth, the laughter, the version of them that made you stay longer than you should have. The moments that felt like proof that what you had was real. And it is slow, very slow, to bring back everything else. The waiting, the confusion, the coldness that lasted days. The way your peace depended entirely on whether they decided to show up that morning. Your mind shows you the smile. It hides the silence that followed. It shows you the apology. It hides the identical behavior 3 weeks later. It shows you the beginning. It hides the pattern. This is nostalgia. And nostalgia is not memory. It is memory with the pain surgically removed. It is the past made safer than it actually was by the discomfort of the present. And if you obey it, if you let that edited version of the past override everything your body learned the hard way, you will walk back into the same situation and call it love, because your loneliness made it look better than it was. A line attributed to Rumi says, "The wound is the place where the light enters you. This wound, the one you're feeling right now, is not there to send you back. It is there to show you what still needs healing, where you were still afraid to be alone, where you confused being chosen sometimes with being valued consistently. The pain is not a verdict on your decision. It is the price of breaking a pattern your nervous system got used to surviving. And nervous systems don't distinguish between patterns that were good for you and patterns that were destroying you. They just register familiar and call it safe. So when the urge to return hits, and it will hit probably more than once, don't answer it immediately. Give it time. Walk. Breathe. Write the message you want to send somewhere you won't send it. Then ask yourself the question that cuts through everything nostalgia tries to sell you. Do I miss them? Or do I miss the hope of who I wanted them to become? Because those are two completely different things. And confusing them is what keeps people returning to relationships that were slowly erasing them, convinced they're going back to love when they're actually going back to familiarity. Familiarity dressed in the costume of love. Here's what I want you to understand about this pain. Stoicism doesn't ask you to feel nothing. It never did. It asks you not to become a servant to every feeling. You can miss them and still know you should not return. You can love them and still admit the pattern was breaking you. You can feel the grief fully and still choose the action that protects your future. That is not coldness. That is not denial. That is emotional discipline. the ability to hold two things simultaneously: the feeling and the truth, the pain and the clarity. Most people can only hold one at a time. They either suppress the feeling to maintain the decision, or they surrender to the feeling and abandon the decision. But you can do both. Feel it completely and still not let it drive. Because walking away is not one decision made once. It is a decision you repeat. You repeat it when the night gets too quiet. You repeat it when they post something that pulls your attention. You repeat it when your mind whispers, maybe it wasn't that bad. And every single time you choose the truth over the craving, the attachment loses a little more of its power. Not all at once, never all at once, but cumulatively, irreversibly, until one morning, and you won't see it coming. You wake up and the first thought isn't them. And that morning is closer than you think, but only if you stop confusing the pain of leaving with a reason to return. Missing them is human. Returning to what kept breaking you is a choice. Make sure you know which one you're making. Next, what to actually do with yourself now. How to rebuild. And the one mistake that turns genuine healing into just another form of waiting. Here's the mistake most people make after finally walking away. They start rebuilding, but they build it facing the wrong direction. They go to the gym, but part of them imagines the moment he sees the change. They post less, but part of them hopes she wonders where they went. They become quieter, calmer, more focused, but underneath all of it, the audience hasn't changed. It's still them. Their reaction, their regret, their eventual recognition of what they lost. And if that's true, if your new life is secretly constructed as a message aimed at one specific person, then you haven't healed. You've just decorated the same waiting with better habits. The center hasn't moved. They're still there. Still the point of everything. And a life built around someone else's reaction, even the reaction of someone you've left, is still a life you don't actually own. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." You already gave enough time to this, to the waiting, the explaining, the hoping, the shrinking, the analyzing of messages that deserved 30 seconds of your attention and received 3 hours. Don't give your healing to them too. That part belongs entirely to you. So here's the distinction that changes everything about how you rebuild. Don't improve your body so they regret losing you. Improve it because your body carried enormous stress for a long time and deserves to be strong again. Don't return to your work so they see you succeeding. Return because your purpose has been waiting patiently while you poured your best energy into uncertainty. Don't become more private to make them panic. Become private because your peace should never again be publicly available to people who handle it carelessly. Rebuild as recovery, not as revenge. And here's what recovery actually looks like in practice, because most people expect it to feel significant and are disappointed when it doesn't. It looks like cleaning your room when everything in you wants to stay in bed. It looks like going to sleep at a reasonable hour instead of scrolling through their profile at midnight. It looks like eating a real meal, taking a walk, finishing one task you've been avoiding. Small, ordinary, undramatic, but compounding every single day. Because here's what those small actions are actually doing beneath the surface. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, however minor, you are rebuilding the trust between you and you. The trust that was quietly eroded every time you said you were done and went back. Every time you set a boundary and then dissolved it. Every time your own word meant less to you than their comfort. You are proving through action, not intention, that you can be relied upon by the most important person in your life, yourself. And as that trust rebuilds, something shifts in how you move through the world. You stop looking for external confirmation that you made the right choice. You stop needing their regret as evidence of your value. You stop organizing your decisions around what they might think or see or feel, because you have something better than their approval now. Your own. Here's what I want you to do, starting today. Not a dramatic overhaul, not a complete life transformation that becomes overwhelming by day 3. One thing, just one. Identify the single habit that best represents the person you were before this relationship took so much from you. The thing you used to do that made you feel most like yourself. And do that thing today, not for anyone watching, not as a signal, not as content, just because it belongs to you. You are reclaiming what belongs to you. Then do it again tomorrow, the day after. Not perfectly, not without missing them, not without difficult mornings and quiet evenings that still feel too empty, but consistently, stubbornly, with the particular determination of someone who has finally decided that their own life deserves their full attention. One day, and you won't be able to predict when, you'll realize something. You went an entire morning without thinking about them, then a full day. Then you'll notice that the things that used to consume you have become background noise, faint, distant, no longer capable of derailing your entire emotional state. That's not indifference. That's not forgetting. That's not even fully moving on. That's just space. Room for your own life to move back in. And in that space, you'll rediscover something you forgot you had. Yourself. Unfiltered. Unchosen by them. Unchained from the need to be. The greatest comeback isn't when they want you back. It's when you no longer organize your life around being wanted by them. Rebuild quietly, without performance, without audience, without checking whether the right person noticed. Just because your life, this one unrepeatable life, deserves your full presence. And you've been somewhere else for far too long. One more thing left. The part that ties all 8 of these together into something you can carry with you permanently. The quiet victory nobody talks about. And why it matters more than anything else we've covered today. Here's the truth nobody puts in the title. The real victory was never making them regret losing you. Maybe they'll feel it. Maybe they'll reach for the warmth they took for granted and find it gone. Maybe they'll finally understand what they had, only after it's permanently unavailable. Maybe they won't feel any of it at all. And that has to be okay, because the moment their regret becomes your reward, they still own your peace. The Stoics understood this completely. Your freedom was never located inside someone else's realization. It was always here, in the decision to stop abandoning yourself to be chosen by someone who couldn't see your value while they had it. That morning you wake up and your first thought isn't them. That's the victory. The boundary you hold when loneliness tries to negotiate it away. That's the victory. The life you build quietly, without audience, without performance. That's the victory. You didn't walk away to prove you were valuable. You walked away because you finally remembered you were. And that is where everything begins.